Hello once again, everybody, and thank you for joining me here on this Friday, July 12th, special edition of Bang the Book Radio. We're going to chat about this UFC Fight Night 155 card, or UFC on ESPN Plus 13, with Christian Pina of the Sports Gambling Podcast. Been a few weeks since we've talked with him, so it'd be good to get him back on the program here, give you some thoughts on this weekend's UFC fight card. Over at bangthebook.com, lots of great work being done by our very talented cast of writers. Christian's got a preview up for this weekend's UFC Fight Night 155 card. We've got all 32 NFL season win totals, daily MLB, NASCAR, golf, tennis, soccer, you name it. It's all over there at bangthebook.com. And don't forget, on Monday, once again, we'll have a new edition of the Bettor's Box, my MLB betting podcast, as we get back into the grind here of the Major League Baseball regular season for the second half. With that, we'll go ahead and bring on Christian Pina of the Sports Gambling Podcast. Christian, how's it going today, man?
Good, man. I missed you. It's been a little while since we talked. We had a pretty crazy UFC 239 event last week, and we continue the MMA train as we come to California with returning of one of their favorite sons in Urijah Faber, and it's a pretty good card. Not necessarily the marquee name value that maybe some fans would like, but for a free card, this one has a lot of steady journeyman type of fighters that can put on a show for sure.
Well, and as I was looking here, we've got events up until August 17th, and then they'll take off August 24th. So should have a lot of stuff coming your way here on Bang the Book Radio, talking with Christian about these UFC fight cards. And I guess I'll ask, since we weren't on the air for UFC 239, both of us extremely busy here the last couple of weeks. I was out of town the last couple of weekends, officiating a wedding last week. It's been very hectic here, to say the least. But hopefully, both of us had better Saturday nights last weekend than Ben Askren did.
Oh man, it is. He is the definition of polarizing for sure, and there was a lot of people very happy to see that. When we talked about this, the original Askren and Lawler fight the first time around, I had kind of said that prices just does not make sense for him when he's at such a disadvantage when every single time the round starts, which, when it starts standing, which, UFC fights tend to start standing every single round. So the prices are always going to be a little inflated just because of who he is. But I mean, that is kind of out of the, Jose Aldo, Conor McGregor type of, I don't want to call it a fluke because he certainly came out with that game plan and it was executed to perfection. But man, it's a step back for him. But, you have to be happy for a guy like Jorge Masvidal, who's going to finally, in theory, get his title shot whenever Usman is cleared to go. Not really sure when that would be or anytime close. Maybe they do an interim type of thing. Maybe they do whatever. But, good and bad to take out of that fight. And for a guy like Askren, the book is out on him. He makes Khabib look like Mike Tyson from a striking department. And if you exploit that, there's certainly paths to beat a guy like that.
Speaking of title shots, let's talk about this Saturday night card again, as you mentioned, in California, in Sacramento specifically. And the main event here for this one between Aspen Ladd, who is the minus 175 favorite here, and Germaine de Randamie is basically a number one contender fight in the women's bantamweight division. So let's go ahead and break this one down here with, as I mentioned, Ladd, a pretty big favorite.
Yeah, she is. I mean, at 24 years old, she's already one of the UFC's top female prospects. She has an excellent wrestling and grappling game, great takedowns, and her striking is continuing to get better. I mean, you look at her record down through the line, perfect 8-0 record, 3-0 inside the UFC octagon since her debut in 2017, I believe in October. And Ladd has really, been on fire as of late. Her game is evolving, and she is doing exactly what you want to see a prospect do, which is get better every single time that she goes out there. The thing is, I mean, with this fight, the Randamie is probably her biggest step up in competition by far, I would say. That being said, Ladd has yet to really face a pure striker like this. Ladd also, had some striking issues and striking defense issues when she fought Ciara Eubanks. So this one is striker versus grappler is the cliche here, but this one's probably going to be determined by whether or not Ladd is going to be able to get this to the ground and maintain top position for the majority of a 15-minute fight. The de Randamie doesn't have much of a wrestling pedigree, that is for sure. That being said, I mean, de Randamie has defended 89% of the takedowns, so this one's going to be a very, very tough matchup for the red-hot prospect in Aspen Ladd. I go back and forth with this price. I think it should be a little bit closer. I certainly do get the minus 170 on Ladd because of, the form and getting better every fight. And who's to say that she goes out here and, doesn't put on the best performance, which, would be the fourth straight best performance of her career in my estimation. So at these prices, it's probably a little bit of a dogger pass. I do think the over is pretty safe in this one, although Randamie could, turn the lights out on Ladd. I think that, if you really want to get crazy, Randamie by knockout or by TKO, probably worth the price of admission. But I would side with Ladd in this one just because she's making leaps and bounds improvements every single fight. But the price is a little bit wide.
Now, one of the things that we've talked about is, sort of when you want to enter the market for these things. Ladd is somebody who's missed weight twice. And then on the day of an event, the day that was supposed to be her debut, July 7th, 2017, she fell ill on the day of the fight. Obviously, maybe from the weight cut, maybe from something else. So that has been kind of a thing for Ladd here, where again, missed weight twice, then canceling on the day of a fight. So, are you sort of, if somebody out there does want to bet Ladd, obviously you probably want to make sure you see how she looks for the weigh-ins.
Yeah, for sure. That's always going to be in your back of your mind when you're talking about fighters that have, struggled with weight cuts and everything like that. Look, I always talk about this. There's different kinds of missing weight. And again, no title opportunity or no title on the line here. So, maybe she gives up her purse, misses weight. And, no matter what happens here, she's very likely to get a title shot if she is, able to get past Randamie. So, some people, the MMA purists of the world, absolutely hate this. But there's something to be said for not depleting your body, giving up 20% of your purse, and, going out there as the much more, hydrated, the much more fresh fighter from, not trying to deplete yourself like that. So the ill side of things and being sick is completely different than kind of, I don't want to say missing weight on purpose, but just giving it up and saying it is what it is. Because truthfully, in this sport right now, unless it's a title fight, there's not a lot to dissuade somebody from doing that outside of the 20% purse, which I know is a lot. But when you have, title fight aspirations, sometimes you get to, put that to the side for a little bit. But yeah, I would, she's a girl that I tend to wait for the actual, people forget there's actually two weigh-ins. There's the official weigh-ins. That's the kind of dog and pony show that you see on Fridays, but the actual weigh-ins is on Thursdays. And, a lot of people do not see that one, and that's the one that really matters, where you can, that was the I forget which fighter, almost fell over. That's the one where you get a real view, because when you see those weigh-ins on TV, they're probably about 20 to 30 pounds heavier than what they're, saying that they're weighing in at on that, show scale.
All right, so we move on to the next fight here. And the last time we saw Urijah Faber was in Sacramento on December 17th, 2016. Long layoff here for the 40-year-old. As a result, he's almost a $3 underdog here against Ricky Simon. What do you think about this, and what do you think about Faber's comeback?
I get it. It's, California's favorite kid. It's Sacramento. It's all those type of things. I'm really surprised that the UFC kind of did this, to be honest. And what I mean by that is I think that there's a place on the undercard. Maybe he's the, headlining prelim against somebody that he could have a much easier time with. And Ricky Simon is not that. I don't really get why I don't want to say why they're doing this to Faber. I understand this. This is trying to build Ricky Simon's resume, trying to build him up and have that big name on the resume, much like we just saw with Arnold Allen last week. So I certainly do understand it. As well, you could also say same thing about Michael Chiesa last week. So I certainly understand that what they're trying to do. It's a little bit cruel and unusual to do this in front of his hometown fans, where they will be going crazy for Faber. He is probably their favorite fighter, from California. When you look at Ricky Simon, undefeated in the UFC, perfect 3-0 record, and he's won his last fights. And, he is somebody that is just in a very different place in life and much more hungry, I really think, than Urijah Faber, who is really, doing his coaching and running his camps and moving on to that next stage here. I mean, when you look at this fight on paper, I mean, the age difference here is absolutely crazy, with Simon being the 26-year-old up-and-comer and the 40-year-old Urijah Faber is absolutely crazy here to me. But it's very hard to, favor Faber in this spot as a barking underdog for any reasons here, with, going up against a talented striker who is basically 14 years younger than him, while Faber's coming off that long layoff. So this is one that I get it. Faber's never going to turn down a fight in California with those fans, the energy. He absolutely lives for that. This matchup is just much too difficult for Faber to overcome here at that plus 290, and certainly would one, understand the minus 350 on a guy like Ricky Simon, but can't even make a case for the dog, to be honest here.
The last of 3 featherweight fights on this card here, the only one on the main card, Josh Emmett, Mirsad Bektic. Bektic a minus 160 favorite in this one. Is this price just a little bit too juicy for you, or do you feel like the favorite's got some value?
Mirsad Bektic is a guy I will never forgive and forget what he did against Darren Elkins, basically 30-26ing Elkins. I mean, at this point, we know that that's kind of Elkins' game plan, I guess, but we didn't know that back then, that he just lets his opponent kind of punch drunk himself to death. And that's what happened with, Bektic basically being knocked out with about 2 seconds left in the fight after they almost had to stop the fight about 3 times because Elkins had lost so much blood. That's the type of domination that Bektic was, putting on. He's a guy who has all the talent in the world. He was basically one of the most highly touted prospects coming into the UFC in a very long time. Got that fight with Elkins as I believe like a minus 600-700 favorite, and coughed it up. So his fight IQ has been kind of something that has been in question. That being said, I mean, you look at Bektic 6-1, he's really kind of turned it around. And so maybe that's just me kind of holding that on his head as he was finishing off a little bit of a parlay for me on that one. But Bektic has all the tools. He is fluid, he's polished, and he is so well-rounded. Both of these guys are great wrestlers, but they also can hit hard, and Bektic has, some of the heaviest hands in the division. That is for sure. You look at this from a crowd perspective, I mean, Emmett is, Faber's teammate, so we should have the kind of crowd behind him. That being said, Bektic a little bit better absolutely everywhere. The better technical striker, a little bit of a better wrestler. And he's also a little bit younger and just heading into the, prime of his career, in my estimation. So all things kind of being equal here, I do understand the minus 160. I wish it was a little bit less than that. But I certainly understand that this is, a step up. Emmett is something of a journeyman guy who doesn't do anything great, but does a lot of things above average. And so that type of fighter, I think, something to be said for that, for sure. But I do understand the price here. Now it's certainly favored Mirsad Bektic.
No offense to Turman and Roberson, but we're going to jump down to the Vettori and Ferrara fight because I know you've got some stronger opinions here on this one, with Vettori a minus 150 favorite to open up the main card.
Yeah, you look at Vettori coming back off a 6-month suspension for a failed drug test, coming back against, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu master in Cesar Ferrara. This is a really good fight. Last time we saw Vettori, he lost a split decision to, stylebender Israel Adesanya, and absolutely no shame in that. That is for sure. He's a great grappler, great striker, and, has the power in his hands. When you look at Ferrara, coming off a decision loss to Ian Heinisch in November, and he's more of the same. It's these cards, this card specifically is a lot of very well-rounded, and I keep using that word journeyman. It's just guys that they don't have that one trick pony thing up their sleeve. They do a lot of things great, and this is certainly the case with these two fighters. When we look at kind of current form, though, the 25-year-old Italian appears to be, to me, a little bit more athletic, a little bit more explosive, and has the edge in technical striking. That being said, Ferrara was had a much stronger grappling pedigree, and also does have the height and reach advantage. So, if Ferrara is able to get this one to the mat, I think that he's probably able to lock in a submission along the way, stop this inside the distance. But Vettori, look down his line, his stats, 73% takedown defense. He should be able to, have the advantage on the feet for sure. So again, a little bit of a striker versus grappler one here, as this card has kind of come to be that theme for that. So definitely go back and forth on this one, but I do think that Vettori is probably able to keep this one standing. His takedown defense should hold, and point fight his way to a decision.
Well, a good amount of waffling back and forth here on the main card from you. Doesn't sound like there's anything that really tickles your fancy as far as something you could lock in from a betting standpoint here. But I do know that you have some on the prelims in this entire fight card on ESPN Plus. So basically just prelim in nature, no network change or anything like that. Let's bounce around that prelim card though, because I know there are some things that you do have some stronger opinions about.
Yeah, definitely. Let's go to 135 pounds, and let's go to Liu Pingyuan against Jonathan Martinez here. This one, stylistically, when you break this down, it favors Martinez when which from a on paper perspective at that plus 120 price. if the style matchup, could hold out. But here's the thing. I really don't think that it will. If this fight stays on the feet, it really does favor Martinez. I just don't think that it will be. Martinez has been taken down 6 times in his 2 UFC fights. And although, Buren wasn't the most, skilled submission artist to take, finish that fight along the way, Liu definitely is. Liu is he is somebody I've been very high on for a long time. Entered the octagon unbeaten since 2013, ending 6 of those fights in the first round, yet to score a finish inside the UFC's octagon. But he comes into this fight with decision wins over Damian Stasiak and Martin May. And so, again, 5 of his 9 stoppage wins comes via submission. And that is a problem for a guy like Jonathan Martinez, who cannot stop a takedown. I think that this one definitely is the best chance that Pingyuan should have to finish this one inside the distance, get his first UFC finish via submission. So I really do really love this price at about the -140 clip I'm seeing right now.
Well, I think it's one of those things too, where, when you look at a guy who's a good takedown artist and he's able to win these fights by decision, I think it sort of speaks to his ability to get that fight on the ground, as you mentioned. So you're probably on the right track there with that handicap. And, hey, if Martinez catches him while they're upright, it kind of is what it is. But, over the course of 3 rounds, as you said, having to defend that many takedown attempts, probably not going to work out that well for Martinez.
No, and like you said, there's just a lot more paths to victory for Liu in this fight, and I really do favor that. And that's not to say that Martinez is this amazing striker. He's not. It's just his striking is a little bit more polished and a little bit more technical. So he does have the advantage there when you look down the line. But to me, that advantage is not anywhere close when you look at the ground game and when you struggle that much with takedowns against a guy who lives for them. This is just probably one of the worst stylistic matchups that I've seen on the board in a little while. And truthfully, I don't say I don't get the price because there is a path to victory for Martinez for this fight. I just stylistically, man, this one is really, really a bad one for Martinez.
All right, so as we look around the rest of the prelims here, what else do you like?
Yeah, let's talk about this Nicco Montano and Julianna Pena fight, just because I think it's 2 names that a lot of people will know. And when you look at this, I mean, Nicco Montano defeated, gone down the line at Lauren Murphy, De La Rosa, Barb Honchak on The Ultimate Fighter, and taking the decision win over Roxanne Modafferi to claim the inaugural title. And the fight with Shevchenko kind of fell apart when Montano messed up her weight cut, and has really been on a roll. Undefeated before joining the professional ranks. She's kind of done it all in this. And you look over on the other side at Julianna Pena coming into this fight on a 2-fight losing streak is nothing that you like to see. That is for sure. But Pena's coming in to replace Sarah McMahon. So this one is a little bit of a short notice one, but the upset happy Montano, looked great. In the flyweight division. Bantamweight has been a little bit of another story for her. And, Pena has been able to take down every one of her UFC opponents, even including Valentina Shevchenko. I don't see Montano winning this fight if she can't establish that top control, and that's going to be the issue. Ring rust will have a lot to do with this as well. But this would be a rough matchup, even without the weight cut and the weight difference. But you put in, Pena's size and strength into this one, and Montano, to me, really has some serious problems. The path to victory there for her, I don't really see it. I think this one's going to be pretty even on the feet. And Pena's, ability to lean on her wrestling here, I think, is going to be pretty much the deciding factor in this one. So, Pena to me is, I get why the line is what it is at -165, and I think you're even getting a little bit of a discount because of the short notice. How Montano has looked. It's just, again, another little bit of a stylistic nightmare for a girl like Nicco Montano.
See, what really interests me about this one with Pena is that she fought Valentina Shevchenko in her last fight, and obviously we all know what she's done. Since that point. I mean, she's had a lot of helium in her career, basically a rocket strapped to her back in her career. Pena hasn't fought in 2.5 years, had a kid in January 2018. So that's kind of why she wasn't around. Is it surprising to you that she takes this fight here on short notice with a 2.5-year hiatus?
I think that the stopping the prospects is something that UFC veterans kind of like to do, and I think that when you can get on this card, it makes a lot of sense from her. I think that is this. I don't know. I go back and forth with it for sure. I don't know what she was waiting for. She's a name that a lot of people inside the UFC will know and should know. So I go back and forth with it. I understand that you don't like to ever say no to a payday, to say no to an opportunity. But they could have made this fight originally. They could have, the winner. There's a lot of different ways that could have gone. I'm not totally sure as to why it kind of went this way. But when you look at the layoffs again, there's different types of layoffs. You talked about having a kid and all that type of stuff. I get it if this is. I wouldn't have done this if this is a kind of a one-off type of thing for her and she's going to kind of, fade back away unless it's just a payday type of situation, which I certainly do get. And that's kind of the mental aspect of UFC handicapping. But if she wants to start her run, the victory over Nicco Montano will certainly kind of jumpstart that. And I think that it's a name and it's a, somebody coming up and all that type of stuff. So it definitely will do a lot for her. So from that perspective, I certainly get it, but it would have been, definitely nice for her to get a full training camp in and all that type of stuff. But I understand you got to take the name fights when they're presented to you. So, from her perspective, I would hope that this is just the start and not really more of a one-off.
All right. Anything else on the prelim card that catches your attention here?
Not a lot else that is out there, man. I mean, the Moraes and Andre Fili fight is definitely one that I think that people will, notice or know at least one, if not two, when it comes to the names there. Andre Fili is a guy that, has been the definition of inconsistent. He's been the definition of up and down. He's alternated wins and losses for a little bit. And so that one, it's hard to get a beat on Moraes on the other side. When he is at his best, he is absolutely lethal. And that is, when he is not that, he tends to put it on cruise control a little bit. And so this one is definitely a back and forth one. Fili certainly outgunned on the feet. But he does have a little bit of a better wrestling type of thing. Fili fights usually tend to go to decision. Moraes definitely is fine coasting one. So I do like the over 2.5 there. Don't believe round props are out there for sure yet. But again, as we talked about my boy Darren Elkins on this card as well, Bektik and Elkins always seem to be linked here going up against Ryan Hall. Look, Elkins is a guy, put together a 6-fight win streak from the heavens from 2015 to 2018. And basically, I've never seen anybody take as much damage, and it was beginning to, worry about his long-term health for sure. He's 35 years old, taking beatings, ungodly beatings in 4 of his last 5. He certainly has found a way to win some of those. But I think that is kind of behind him. I think the best days of Darren Elkins being Homer Simpson in that ring are certainly gone. And Ryan Hall should take advantage of the lack of speed of Elkins for sure. And, he's somebody who's kind of employed that one trick WWE finisher with that heel hook. So definitely would favor the Ryan Hall at -115 over Elkins. I think we're even getting a really big discount because of that win streak and what Elkins was able to do during that time frame. Basically, embedding himself as the toughest or one of the toughest fighters in UFC. Nobody will ever take that away from him. But this price is really based on what he did back then and not indicative of what he is in the future. So definitely would favor Ryan Hall at that -115. Basically, pick him fight, I think, is a great spot as the last one.
One last thing I'll touch on here with you, Christian. Everything's bigger in Texas, or so they say. And next week's fight card at the AT&T Center in San Antonio, UFC on ESPN4. Man, there are a lot of familiar names. This looks like a very strong non-pay-per-view card.
Yeah, one of the strongest free cards in a while. I mean, we have RDA, Leon Edwards, Olenek Harris, Greg Hardy's going to be on that card as well. I mean, that fight between James Vick and Dan Hooker could be a bloodbath, could be fight of the year candidate, definitely fight of the night. And that we look at, we have Andrei Arlovsky, Caceres, Raquel Pennington, and Irene Aldana. They really stacked this one. I don't know why, but I'm super happy that they did. Ray Borg is on that one as well. So a ton of big names upcoming for that Texas card as well. Much more, kind of marquee names that fighters definitely will know about. I mean, you look at the third fight of that night. I mean, Vic and Hooker should be an absolute banger. That one could, really be on a UFC pay-per-view undercard. Type of thing. So Greg Hardy, we'll see what happens there as well. I'm sure it'll be a massive favorite, but this one definitely a much more stacked event next week when it comes to name value.
Well, we'll certainly talk a lot about that one with Christian Pina of the Sports Gambling Podcast at Christian Pina, Pina on Twitter, and his preview posted over at bangthebook.com. Christian, always a pleasure, man. Thank you so much for joining me, bud. We'll talk to you again next week.
All right, buddy. Good luck this weekend. Enjoy the fights.
There you go. There's Christian Pina of the Sports Gambling Podcast at Christian Pina, Pina on Twitter. Once again, as I mentioned on Monday, new edition of the Bettor's Box, our MLB betting podcast. Monday mailbag attached with that at Skating Tripods on Twitter or adam@bangthebook.com via email to send in your questions for that. That'll do it for me. Thank you so much for listening, everybody, and I will talk to you again on Monday.